Okay, this video is how to write better, part 8, and the main topic here is going to be appositives. An appositive is just like a way to describe the subject that you're talking about. And so I'll just give you one example real quick. Isaac Newton, discoverer of the law of gravity, was a heretic. Okay, so this little phrase here which describes him, discoverer of the law of gravity, that's the appositive. And so again, it's just a way to provide more information about the subject. And it's a simple little addition to a sentence, but it can add a lot of meaning and it makes the writing more conversational. And the guy who figured it out was this guy over here. Francis Christensen is his name. He was an English literature professor at University of Southern California, USC, and he noticed that not that many grammar teachers are good writers. And he also noticed that what they were teaching in all the classes in the high schools and the colleges did not resemble the way that the great authors actually wrote. So what he did was he took some of the best books he could find of literature from the last 100 years, and he sat down and he read these books and he just kept track with a pen and pencil of every type of sentence. These guys know how to categorize grammar backwards and forwards. And what he noticed was a tremendously large number of the sentences were these appositives, and that those were often the best parts. They would make the writing come alive, more like conversation with an interesting friend. So once he realized that the whole approach to teaching was wrong, and it kind of reminded me of just a backwards approach. Like if you're going to teach Spanish, for example, the way they teach Spanish in a high school and a college is by learning grammar. But that's not how people learn it in the real world. And the same thing had happened with English literature and with English writing, English composition, that it was being taught the wrong way. There was too much emphasis on formal grammar, too much emphasis on periodic sentences, and not enough on this concept of the appositive. And the appositive in writing leads into what is called cumulative syntax. Cumulative syntax, for our purposes here, we're especially referring to loose sentence structure, running sentence structure. So we're not going to get into all this grammar. The point of this is not grammar. The point of this brief talk here is just that throw in little descriptive phrases because that's how you talk in conversation, and it makes the writing more natural, more fun. I'll give you a little more advanced version of an appositive in a sentence. This one's by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Even those who renounce Christianity and criticize it, in their innermost being, they still try to follow the Christian ideal. No one has been able to create a higher ideal of man and virtue than the ideal given by Christ. Okay, so this little descriptive phrase thrown back upon the original statement, that's an example of an appositive. Okay. And we're taught to write in complex sentences, but Francis Christian, he made one after another clever statements about writing in the English language. He said, written language relies primarily on the sentence as its unit of expression, but a spoken language relies upon the phrase. So, yeah, we speak in these little intonation units. And here's one, an appositive sentence from Winston Churchill. He was actually a pretty good writer. He said, Mr. Somerwell, a most delightful man, to whom my debt is great. And it's set off in the middle of a sentence by these hyphens here, or dashes we'll call them, was charged with the duty of teaching the stupidest of boys the most disregarded thing, namely to write mere English. Okay, and the dash in this case at the end of the sentence can be used to throw in an afterthought. But you see how Mr. Somerwell, a most delightful man, to whom my debt is great. That's how a person speaks in conversation, and that makes it come to life. That's really the part that brings that sentence to life. How he treasures and cherishes the man who spent some time with him when he was kind of a screw-up as a kid, in a sense. Okay, so the appositives are a quick way to add more detail. They've also been called a generative rhetoric, and they make it easy to add more complexity to the sentence. Yeah, and by the way, there's a whole entire, you could teach a whole course about this concept of appositives and cumulative syntax. And there is a course. This, by the way, is the book Towards a New Rhetoric, and it's a summary of the work of Francis Christensen. It's by another author, though. This guy is Don Stewart. But there was an entire course by a guy named Brooks Landon. You know, a bunch of his YouTube videos are available for free on YouTube. But he teaches an entire course through the teaching company, thegreatcourses.com. I think it might even be a Wondrium. And he goes through all of the advanced issues in cumulative syntax. But Cumulative syntax. So here's the word right here, cumulative syntax. That's more useful if you're going to write novels and you want to, it's a loose running sentence is a sentence like the mind running, anxious, thoughtful, nervous, trying to predict the future. And that can be exciting in the concept of recreating how we think in a novel. Most of the writing I do, almost all of it, is, nonfiction. So I'm not as interested in that. If you are interested in fiction writing, then it'd be worth your while. Brooks Landon, here's his name right here. Brooks Landon, his course is called Building Better Sentences. It's a DVD course and there's an online version of it. It's actually great. He's a professor from the Iowa Writers. They have a very good Masters of Fine Arts program over there. Okay, the loose running sentence has been called the opposite of the periodic sentence, like the Ciceronian sentence. Brooks Landon likes to even call the periodic sentence suspensive because you're waiting for that word to come at the end. You're in suspense until it arrives. Here's an example of a periodic sentence or a suspensive sentence where the key word comes at the end, like the subject word, if you will. Again, by Winston Churchill. There is nothing like oratory. It can make a commoner a king. And I think that's a good point. If you're just, a regular low-life citizen, being a good orator, speaker, writer, it gives you more oomph, more gravitas. So it's well worth your while to try to become more articulate and learn how to write better. And it's actually fun to do. I enjoyed all this time I spent on this stuff. So this guy, Francis Christensen, he's really the one who developed our understanding of cumulative syntax. The beginning of a sentence is called the left side. The middle is clearly called the middle, cleverly called the middle. The latter part is called the right side of the sentence. And we're not going to get into this stuff right now. This is just a brief lecture. We're almost done, actually. But I'm letting you know. In the future, we might talk more about the cumulative syntax. And it's a big subject, but it's mostly for the type of writing, for writing fiction, for novels. And I really admire the way this guy said, hey, we're making a mistake. And he was able to change directions and re-transform the entire field. That's what a genius does. I actually think that's a good definition of a genius. Someone who is able to transform a field. So Francis Christensen transformed the field of understanding English language, English syntax, and teaching writing to college students. Okay. Okay, here's just one brief example. This will be the last slide here of how this stuff sort of works. The ancient customs on which Rome was founded. That would be called the base clause, the kernel clause, or level 1, the first statement. And then something that modifies the base clause is called a level 2. Later on, we'll learn there's a level 3. A level 3 just refers back to modify the initial modifier. Okay? So the ancient customs on which Rome was founded have been so utterly buried in oblivion that not only are they no longer practiced, but they are forgotten. Okay, that's a quote by Cicero. All right, so here's one by Oscar Wilde, the great Irish writer. To win back my youth, I would do anything except take up exercise, wake up early, or be a useful member of the community. Okay, so you can see how I would do anything refers back to the initial statement, and then I would do anything except take up exercise refers back to the second statement. So this is a level 3. Wake up early, again referring back to this, or be a useful member of the community. So anyways, that's a lot of fun there. I think that's the last slide. Yes, it is. So anyways, hope that was useful.